And the sound of the organ inspired me so much that when there were about 20 boys in the choir, and I was about 14, we thought that we would try some sort of prank, as you do at that age. So we found some self-raising flour, and we put self-raising flour in the piped mouths of the organ that was then there. And it was, we all got the sack for an entire week, and everybody was covered in white dust when the organ started, so we weren't the flavour of the month. But from there on, we've survived. Well, that organ, being more serious for a moment, was an electro-pneumatically assisted action organ. So everything, when you played the keys, you know what I'm talking about. I'm sure you do. If anybody stopped, just stop me and say, I don't know what you're talking about, please do. The electro-pneumatic organ, the electric organ, the pneumatic organ. All power-assisted organs, just the same as a car with an automatic gearbox or one with a manual box. The manual box is a tracker action organ. Right, well, tracker action organs started all those years ago. And the wonderful part about tracker action, though this is invisible, it ensures that the builder who is producing a mechanical organ adheres to a particular skeletal and architectural form. And that form is visual, and it's normally within the case, and very clearly within the case. Very often it can't be, it can't afford to be, etc. There are all sorts of reasons why it won't be in the case, and that's because the case won't fit it. The arch is too small, etc. Hundreds of reasons. So if you are a builder, and you are asked to build an architecturally fine instrument, and you're starting, I don't know, at 32-foot pitch, or is this organ at 16-foot pitch, you know you've got to fill a very large space. And I would like to try and show you why, for a start, this organ is as it is. Number one, when you built a mechanical organ, it was nearly always symmetrical. And I felt, as an organ builder, as I think most organ builders do, that was wonderful purity. This symmetry that is expressed, I mean, let's face it, in probably one of the finest European organs that we all know of, St. Bavo in Haarlem. Do you all know that instrument vaguely? Does anybody here? And at the side, at each side, I don't know if you can all see, I hope you can, there are 32-foot principles. So this organ is built with a 32-foot base. And if it's built on a 32-foot base, that means the first manual, that is the great organ, has to be built, should be built, both acoustically and artistically, visually, on a 16-foot base. And the next manual should have a base, and I'm talking about open pipes only, not stopped pipes. So if you have an open base at 8-foot pitch, you can have at 8-foot pitch, you can have a 16-foot stopped pipe, because it will occupy no higher space. So you have this wonderful architectural form that just happens through nature. And it's not because organ builders made it so, it is because it is natural. When you then go to the 1970s and the 1980s, those symmetries still existed very, very much, and many organs were symmetrical and brand new, beautiful organs. We got to a point in the 70s where I think people had run out of steam, and so asymmetry was the thing that was in. And this was a vogue that hit organ building as it did furniture, as it did buildings. And therefore, you land up with the pedals on one side instead of on two sides. And this is a good example of an asymmetrical instrument built in the same form. On the facade, you can see the 16-foot pipes which are in the pedal, which represent the 16-foot principle. Now, the only thing, which is a little bit of an anathema to most English organists, is that they'll say, well, where's the open wood? And true, an open wood is a lovely, big, roaring flute in the bass. But it is very much, very, very expensive. You can't put it in the front of a case, because if you do, it is a wall to all pipes behind it. You also, it doesn't look very pretty. So a 16-foot principle in metal, all right, you might have something wooden somewhere else, but a 16-foot principle, which is the highest, the tallest, the longest pipe in that department, tells you how high the organ is going to be. So the chest and all its bellows and motors are in the piece underneath, and the pipes are on the top of that chest, which is right level with your eye. And the longest pipe on that is a flue pipe, that is thought to be pretty to look at, is the principal. So that is 16 foot. Bottom C is 16 foot long. We go then to the great organ, which is right at the top. And the great organ, the bottom C on the far left, is the open diapason 8, or principal 8. And if you look at it, it's principal 8, bottom C, C sharp, D sharp, E, and F. And it continues. F sharp is next to bottom C, and so on. That's how it runs. Now, in order to make it run down in that logical form, the action has to be made in a logical form. And I will show you that later. As you can imagine, if you have electric action or electropneumatic action, well, you can put the pipes pretty well anywhere. You really can. But with a mechanical action, you have to stick to a discipline. You can change rollerboards around, and you'll say, what's a rollerboard? I will show you in a little while, so you understand that it is really simple. But a rollerboard allows the manuals to play the pipes wherever they are in the case, within reason. Within reason. The reason being that the more interference there is between the key and the pallet which supplies wind to that pipe, the less exciting this organ is to play. So, of course, we talk about tracker action, and then we might go on and say, well, there are two styles of tracker action. One is a backfoot action, and another is a suspended action. And a suspended action, if we imagine for a moment that in the airtight box, which is the wind shaft upon which the pipes stand, and underneath those pipes are the little plugs called pads, and I will show you some. If they are literally there, and the key is just dangling on the pallet, and you touch it so the pallet opens, you have an extremely precise, very, very sensitive action. With a backfall action, which this is, it's a little more complicated. Simply that there's a seesaw within the action, not all moving in one direction. Suspended actions were the earliest. Backfall actions came on a little bit later. We go from the 8-foot principle, which represents the largest pipe on the great department, the tallest, the longest. Just behind it, you can see some copper pipes of the same length. Well, in Frobenius's wonderful way, of course, that's not what you think it is, another open pipe. In fact, it is the bourdon. But the bourdon at 8-foot length, it speaks a 16-foot pitch because it has a stopper. If you stop any pipe, you double its acoustical length. So, on the pedal, we've only got a 16-foot principle. Wow, couldn't have had a 32-foot. And there were arguments when this was put in, so many arguments. Why don't we have a 32-foot? We'll have an electronic 32-foot. We'll do this, we'll do that. Nonsense. It was all nonsense, and we've only got a 16. I'm a little bit old-fashioned. I think if you can't afford a 32, or you haven't got the space to have one, it's not meant. Don't buy an electronic 32. However, what we did do is to produce, rather, because Frobenius were not building in the English way. They were not, when they came here and built this quite large, semi-romantic organ, romantically styled organ, for Kingston Parish Church, they were a little bit out of their depth, and they would have been the first to admit it. So, in their beautiful way, they built everything on fairly light pressures, not a great big heavy pedal, as if you'd asked Harrison's or Manders, you'd have had a very different instrument, tonally, with probably a far heavier pedal. And we might have all been happy for that. But I must say, I have been here on many occasions when the church is absolutely jam-packed full, and the organ does a very good job. It still does, and even has some bass. Though if you listen to that principle on its own, you'll say, oh, it's a little bit weak. And I'll just show it to you. Let's just hear bottom C, and then I'll show you, of course, what you all know. Here's bottom C, which is this type of hair. That's the mouth. You might think, well, that's rather an expensive draft. It's not that great. Now, we needed a 32, and people didn't know what they were going to do. At one point, they were going to put a set of 32s over there. Another point, as I say, we were going to buy an electronic one. So we decided to have a quint. So if you add the quint, which is 10 2/3 in length, and therefore is playing a G above bottom C, the 16-foot pitch, this is what it will sound like. I hold the 16 on its own, and then I add the quint. I put the quint off. I add the quint. And then add the 8-foot flute above. So that's bottom C, C sharp. Now, when you put those together, it makes a poor man's 32, if you like. But you can't have everything. But I will go back now to the great organ, if I may. We could not get a 32. If you wanted a 32 in the pedal organ, well, it would have been that square, stopped, and as big as the 16s. And as you can see, the width of that frame, you can only get so many pipes in. So a 32, even a stopped one, was completely out of the question. So we went for the cheaper version of a quint. Great organ went back to basics again with an 8-foot principal and a 16-foot flute, bourdon, right behind it. In the swell, we have another 8-foot front. The 8-foot front, because there is no diapason in the swell, is a gamba. And also we have 8-foot flutes behind it, which of course you can see. In the choir, there is a 4-foot principal in the front. So basically, apart from the swell, because of course a gamba 8 is a very tall stop, bottom C, it's quite a large pipe, and you're going to reflect it in the case, so that is what they did. But they've tried to say, that is a tonal box for the pedal, all its wind chest, all its action, all its sound is contained within one tonal box. The great is exactly the same. It is contained within one box, the swell and the choir, all exactly the same. If you base the pedal, as on this one, at 16, the great at 8, the swell, it would be at 8, the positive, 4, the choir has 4, not an typical English choir, as of course you'll see. If you do that, then everything notches up. Everything is high. If you have 16-foot and 8-foot and 4-foot principals on the pedal, and you have exactly the same on the great, the scale of bottom C and all those C's are correspondingly smaller as you go up, and this is the point I'll make. If you look at bottom C, and I cannot remember the scale of that bottom C, we'll just call it 200 millimetres. By scale I mean diameter. We'll call it 200 millimetres in scale. Bottom 8-foot C would be, let's just say, 150 millimetres or 160. Bottom C of the 8-foot principal in the great will be that little bit smaller. And therefore, if you play a line of music on the 8s and the 16s in the pedal, the great should be that little bit lighter. And if you add every department on top of that, all the scales are that much smaller. So by the time you get to the choir, the 4-foot principal is quite a delicate little thing. Whereas on the swell it's a bit bigger, on the great it's even bigger, and on the swell, but on the pedal it is even bigger. But the wonderful thing is that this is all reflected in this casework, and it starts much earlier than this. Frobenius's beautiful organ, they built an organ in Vangen, outside Copenhagen. And this was it that they built. It was in black steel, and it was an organ builder's dream, because there were steps, nearly as wide as this aisle here, at the back going up to the different departments, and it was all out of black steel, and it was almost a model, I think, for this organ. This organ wasn't built when this was built. I don't think it was. No, it wasn't. 79 this organ was built. So they did this in about 81, 82, and this is just splendid. It's even purer than this one. 16, 8, 8, and 4. But is a lovely organ. But it also shows a great deal about the Frobenius firm, whom I have a great deal of respect for, as I think some of you know. I wanted also to talk to you about reeds. I'm going to take you, if I may, around the back of the organ in a little while. But before I do, I'd like to talk to you about reed stops. I mean, there are two basic families of stops in all organs, and they are flue pipes and reed pipes. The reed pipes produce their sound mechanically, and the flue pipes as whistles. The reed pipes, well, this little book, this tiny little book, that is just about the reeds in Poitiers Cathedral. This is just about the reeds, a few stops in Poitiers. What I'd like to show you, and I will go and get one in a moment, there are illustrations in this book as to how reeds are made. And when I think that this book was written in the 18th century, and we look at the reeds behind there, and we see them exactly the same as they are in this book. And then we get the smartest pipe makers in Europe, who are called Gieseker, who produce reeds, mainly reeds. They do all pipe work now, and their illustrations of their reeds are exactly what we've got in this book. They are the same as we have here in St Bavo, Haarlem, and they haven't changed at all. Reeds are an engineering problem, and as a result of that, the only way a reed will stay in tune is if it's really well made. And if you find a reed that is not well made, it will never stay in tune. If it has wedges that hold the tongue in position, that shrink and become loose on their blocks, and the tongue no longer is held tight, it will not make the right sound. Indeed, it will falter altogether. We have a little problem with this organ, because the reeds are most of these reeds are made out of tin, and I'm sad to say that one or two in the swell have started to collapse. Well, you find that in Victorian organs. I mean, this is only 20 or 30 years old, but it still happens because there is such a lot of weight. And yet they're such huge, big, cumbersome things, but they are so delicate. But may I ask you, first of all, if you'd be all happy to come round the back and have a look inside, and I will try and do a little bit of explanation about the rollerboard, which, when you play from the keyboard, allows trackers to move. Let me just show you. If we talk about the great organ, which is this keyboard here, that is playing those pipes up there. The swell organ plays this lot here, all mechanically, and the choir here playing so, and the pedal obviously there. But I'd like to show you, if I may, just a little bit as to how that worked, because it's very, very simple. Now, before I do, I have to say something else. Mechanical action has its limitations. And I personally, it's only personal, and other people may not agree with me, people will say that if you build a mechanical action organ, you can build it at 100 stops or whatever, and you can still play fine. Well, I mean, some builders are capable of making really wonderful tracker action organs with very large stop lists. However, if it's mechanical action, you are beginning to dice with death, because the weather might change, and suddenly the couplers don't work. I'm talking on a large organ. So this instrument, like many larger instruments, and I don't think any the worse of it, I worry about it philosophically, but I can cope with it, has electric couplers. So the minute you draw the swell to great coupler, you are coupled to the swell electrically. So you don't have an increased sense of pressure on the keys. Barker lever, of which you all will know something, was doing exactly that, but in a far clumsier way. But electric action, wonderful direct electric action on mechanics, works very quickly, very efficiently. And the reason we had to have it on this organ is the church isn't very high. And tracker action works best when it's held vertically, when it's suspended from chests that are on top of each other. This is a little bit broader and a little more difficult. And for that reason, electric action was thought to be a good idea. And also, they did want quite a lot of foundations on this organ. This organ was really built at the end of the time when we were talking about the organ of the Weber movement, where everything was extremely strict and mathematical. We said to Flaminius, please build us an organ which will accompany Howells and Stanford. Well, they didn't know who Howells and Stanford were. And so it was very hard to get them to build strings like this. I shouldn't be unkind to Flaminius because they've made a wonderful job, and their instruments are wonderful, and there are lots of romantic ones. But we did have a lot of flue work that was on an 8-foot and 16-foot pitch on this organ for organs of that time, of 1980s. And for that reason, they were a bit scared, because the minute you have 8-foots and 16s, the pluck I refer to pluck, I mean the key touch is stiffer. The more you couple to it, the more pipes you're feeding. It's rather like having a bath, which is half empty of water and being able to pull the plug out. But if you fill it up, it comes out with a huge plop. If you pull it, that's exactly what you're doing with your little finger when you're trilling on the grater. But of course, the more the water, or the more the pipes, the more the water in the bath, because they're drawing a lot of air around those pads. And therefore, this was built really quite scientifically. And it does work extremely well, and it accompanies quite a varied amount of music on a Sunday. Would you like to